If someone had told me a pen stroke could trap two strangers in a marriage neither chose, I would have snapped the pen in half. I didn't believe in love. Some called me cold, others ruthless. I've been called worse. To me, love was a story people told to excuse their own weaknesses. I didn't need it. I didn't chase ribbons and whispered promises. I chased results. I built empires. I conquered. At least, that was true until the night my parents dropped a bomb over dinner. "You're getting married," my mother said, like she was announcing a routine merger. My fork stalled midair, the rare steak turning tasteless on my tongue. "Excuse me? It's already arranged," my father said, voice flat and final, as if he were signing a contract. "You've delayed this long enough. Avery, you're 35. It's time." "To who?" I snapped, patience worn thin. "Elena Marquez." A dry laugh scraped out of me. I knew the name. I'd seen her at family gatherings, always quiet on the edges. Too polite, too soft. Her family, the ones my parents had rescued years ago, keeping the bank from taking their land. Apparently that favor had a price. I tossed my napkin onto the table. "You're joking." "We're not," my mother said sharply. "You want this company? Then you will marry Elena. That's our condition." My fists tightened beneath the table. The company I built, the empire I bled for, now tethered to a marriage I didn't choose. "They're poor," I muttered, bitter. "Of course," she said, unruffled. I didn't bother asking whether Elena wanted this. I already knew. Who turns down wealth, power, status? I was the final rung in their climb. It wasn't like she loved me. She couldn't. And I certainly didn't love her. Love wasn't part of this equation. It never would be. When I saw her again, at the formal engagement dinner, she looked just like I remembered. Quiet, polite, wearing a soft cream dress that hung a little too loose on her frame. "Avery," she greeted me, her voice barely above a whisper, her hands nervously clutching the hem of her dress. I nodded stiffly. "Elena." We sat across from each other, our families chatting, laughing like they'd just made the happiest arrangement in the world. Elena's eyes flicked to me, unsure, hesitant. I know this isn't what you want." "You're right," I said bluntly, sipping my wine. "Let's not pretend otherwise." Her smile faltered, but she nodded anyway. "I just want to make this as easy as possible for both of us." I shrugged. "As long as you play your part, you'll get what you want. Status, comfort, money." She flinched, but didn't argue. Maybe that was what annoyed me the most. She wasn't even pretending to fight this. Was she that desperate? The weeks that followed were a blur of wedding planners, cake tastings I didn't attend, dress fittings I couldn't care less about. Elena moved into my house shortly after the announcement. It was a mansion, too big for one, too. I barely saw her in the first few days, but slowly little things began to change. Fresh flowers appeared in the hallway. Soft music drifted from the living room on Sunday mornings. Sometimes there were simple home-cooked meals waiting for me when I came back from work. I didn't ask her to do any of it, and yet she did. One evening, I came home exhausted from a brutal board meeting. The lights were dim, the dining table quietly set for two. Elena was there waiting, her hands folded on her lap. "I made dinner," she said softly. I stared at the food, then at her. "You don't have to do this." "I know," she murmured, "but I want to." I sat down, not because I wanted to humor her, but because I was too tired to argue. The food was simple, warm, comforting. It unsettled me. Why was she doing this? Why did it feel nice? No, I wouldn't allow this to mean anything. This was just a transaction, nothing more. One night as I passed by her room, I overheard her on the phone. "Yes, Ma, I'm fine." Avery's kind in her own way. Kind me. I almost laughed. Was she delusional or just hopelessly naive? I left before I could hear more. Love was never part of this arrangement. It couldn't be. I wouldn't let it be. But even as I told myself that, I couldn't shake the strange ache that started blooming inside me. One I refused to name. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was something else. I'd figure it out later. For now, I was still in control. At least that's what I told myself. Up to unwanted promise, I wasn't prepared for how quickly Elena made herself comfortable in my house. Not in a demanding way. Not in the way I expected. It was the quiet kind of invasion. Soft towels folded neatly in the bathroom. Cups of warm tea left on my desk. Little notes that said things like, "Remember to rest," or "Your schedule's too tight. Don't forget dinner." I told myself they were unnecessary, but I never threw them away. The wedding planners became relentless, pestering me to approve designs, flowers, menus. I didn't care. When they asked about color palettes, I told them to ask Elena. When they wanted to schedule our pre-wedding photo shoot, I told them to cancel it. When they begged me to practice the wedding vows, I refused because I didn't need vows. I didn't need to make promises I didn't believe in. But Elena, she attended every meeting. I saw her taking notes, quietly making choices. She didn't complain. She didn't push. She just existed in this strange limbo between being my future wife and being my what? My housemate, my employee. I didn't know what to call her, and I didn't want to know. One night, as I came home late from another exhausting day at the office, I found her sitting in the garden barefoot, her face tilted towards the sky. I should have walked past her. I should have gone inside. But I didn't. "Why are you out here?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She turned to me, startled, but smiling faintly. "The stars are clear here. I like looking at them. Stars are just burning gases. There's nothing magical about them. Maybe," she said, hugging her knees. "But sometimes it's nice to believe there's something beautiful about things we don't understand." I didn't respond. I didn't know how. So I walked away. A few days later, I caught a fever. I thought I could power through it. I thought I could just drown myself in work. But I collapsed at my desk. When I opened my eyes, I was in bed. The room was dim and Elena was there sitting by my side, gently pressing a cold towel on my forehead. "You should have told me you weren't feeling well," she whispered. I wanted to scold her, to tell her she didn't need to fuss over me. But her touch was warm, careful, real. I let my eyes close. Maybe just for tonight. I could allow this. Our parents kept pushing for the wedding. Invitations were sent out. The venue was finalized. I still didn't care. But I noticed that I wasn't as angry about it anymore. Sometimes I even found myself watching Elena when she wasn't looking. The way she bit her lip when she was focused on arranging things. The way she hummed softly when she cooked. The way she always set my coffee just the way I liked it, even though I never told her how. It was also annoying because it felt too easy to let her stay. And I didn't like how comfortable that thought was becoming. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find her preparing dinner. "Why do you keep doing this?" I asked. She glanced at me, puzzled. "Doing what?" "Taking care of me." Her hands paused, but her voice remained steady. "Because I don't want to live like strangers." "We are strangers," she smiled sadly. "We don't have to be." I hated that answer. I hated how much it rattled me because somewhere deep inside me, I didn't want to be strangers with her either. But I wasn't ready to admit that. So, I went back to my office, closed the door, and buried myself in work. If I stayed busy enough, maybe I could drown this uncomfortable feeling, whatever it was. Elena's parents visited often. They adored me even though I gave them nothing but polite nods and stiff hands. Hakes. They told me how grateful they were, how they were so happy to see their daughter marrying someone like me. I wanted to scream at them. Why would they be happy their daughter was marrying someone who didn't love her? Someone who didn't even believe in love. But I stayed silent. I let them believe whatever they wanted to believe. As the wedding date drew closer, I started noticing something else. Elena had stopped smiling as much. She still did her routines. She still cooked, cleaned, arranged things quietly around the house. But there was something distant about her now, like she was slowly pulling away. I told myself I didn't care, but the growing silence in the house, it was starting to feel heavier. One night, I passed by her room and heard her crying softly. I paused. I almost knocked, but I didn't. I turned away because this wasn't supposed to matter. And yet, as I walked back to my room, I realized I hated the sound of her tears more than I thought I would. The more I tried to distance myself from the fragrance of warmth Elena, the harder it became to ignore her. She was persistent, not in words, but in presence. Always there, always gentle, always quietly folding herself into the empty spaces of my life I didn't know existed. One morning, I left for work in a rush, forgetting my watch on the kitchen counter. When I arrived at the office, I found it neatly packed inside a velvet pouch waiting for me on my desk. Elena had it delivered. The note inside simply said, "You never leave without it." I stared at the handwriting longer than I should have. The house continued to change. Fresh flowers, lilies, pieces, sometimes sunflowers appeared in vases I didn't know we had. My bathroom now had towels that smelled like lavender instead of the usual bland detergent. The kitchen sometimes played soft jazz in the morning, a song or two drifting through the quiet hallways. I caught myself enjoying the silence less. I caught myself looking for her. One rainy afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. I found Elena sitting by the window sketching something in her notebook. She didn't hear me come in. I almost walked past her, but something about the curve of her back, the way her lips parted slightly in focus, the soft sound of her pencil moving against paper, it made me pause. I stepped closer and saw what she was drawing. It was me. I watched her as she carefully shaded the lines of my face. So familiar, so tender. Too tender. "You're wasting your time," I said quietly. She jumped, startled. Her pencil slipped. "I'm not," she said, quickly closing the notebook. "It's nothing, just practice." I wanted to tell her to stop. I wanted to tell her to never draw me again. Instead, I asked, "Do you always sketch people you don't like?" She hesitated. "Who said I don't like you?" I almost laughed, but the lump in my throat stopped me. As the days passed, I found myself coming home earlier. I found myself staying. We would eat dinner together in silence. Sometimes we'd watch the rain from the balcony, both of us holding mugs of tea. And sometimes I would ask her about her work, her hobbies, her childhood. She would answer carefully, patiently, like she didn't want to scare me away. There was no dramatic shift between us. Just little things, like when she offered me an umbrella before leaving for work. Like when she started knowing exactly how I liked my coffee without asking. Like when she draped a blanket over me when I accidentally fell asleep on the couch. It wasn't grand, but it mattered more than I was willing to admit. One evening, I returned home to find her in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked. I stood by the door, watching her for a moment. When she noticed me, she smiled, a real one. "You're home early," she said. I shrugged. The meeting ended sooner than expected. "Good," she said, setting the table. "I made your favorite." I frowned. "How did you know?" She blushed faintly. I noticed you always finish it." I sat down, the tension in my chest strangely lighter. "You notice a lot of things." She placed a plate in front of me. "Only about you." That silence again, heavy, meaningful, uncomfortable. "Elena." I started, unsure why I even called her name. She looked at me, waiting. But the words I wanted to say, I didn't know how to say them. So I looked away. "Nothing," I murmured. She didn't press. She never did. Later that night, I stood outside her room again. I wondered if she was writing another letter. I wondered if she still cried when I wasn't looking. I wondered if she still believed I was nothing but a stranger wearing a ring she didn't choose. I returned to my own room, restless. My chest had in ways I couldn't name. Was this guilt? Was this loneliness? Was this something else? No, it couldn't be. But it wasn't love. It was never love. But the house didn't feel so big anymore. And the silence didn't feel so comfortable. And the thought of Elena leaving, that idea, that possibility, it suddenly terrified me more than I could understand. Elena started spending less time at home. At first I told myself for the weight of her absence didn't matter. And she had errands. She had family visits. She was busy with wedding preparations. I convinced myself that her absence meant nothing to me. But the house felt emptier. The flowers started wilting in their vases. The soft music that once filled the halls was replaced by silence again. The little notes on my desk stopped appearing. And for reasons I refused to face, I missed them. I missed her. I found myself coming home earlier looking for signs of her. Sometimes she wouldn't return until late. Sometimes she wouldn't return at all. And when I'd ask where she went, she would just smile and say, "Out." I needed fresh air. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to tell her that she should have told me. But who was I to ask? I was just a stranger, right? One afternoon, I caught her by surprise. I came home early and found her sitting by the window, bags packed at her feet. She stood up, startled. "You're back. Where are you going?" I asked, heart pounding. I was going to stay with my aunt for a few days. I crossed my arms, trying to sound unaffected. "Why?" Her fingers trembled as she clutched the strap of her bag. "Because I thought you wouldn't notice if I left." The words sliced through me. "I would have noticed," I said, harsher than I meant to. She blinked, surprised. "Why would you notice?" she whispered. I swallowed, feeling my throat tighten. "Because this house feels different when you're gone." Her lips parted, stunned. I didn't think it mattered to you." "It does." I let the truth hang there. Raw and uncomfortable. More than I want to admit. She set her bag down slowly. "I won't leave then," she said, voice soft. I nodded, but I couldn't meet her gaze because I was terrified of what I was starting to feel. As the wedding date crept closer, people began noticing the shift between us. Our families smiled wider. The house staff whispered behind closed doors. I still told myself it was just part of the arrangement, that Elena was just playing her role well, that I was just adjusting. But some nights when I found myself leaning into her quiet presence, when I found myself asking about her day just to hear her talk, when I found myself sitting next to her in comfortable silence, not wanting to leave the moment, it didn't feel like just an arrangement anymore. One night, I came home to find her asleep on the couch, her sketchbook open in her lap. I sat beside her, careful not to wake her. Her drawings filled the pages. There were landscapes, flowers, random objects, but most of them were me. Me working, me drinking coffee, me watching the rain. Each sketch captured me in ways I didn't know anyone ever noticed. And at the very end of the sketchbook, there was a drawing of the two of us standing side by side, smiling, a future I didn't know she was brave enough to dream. I closed the book gently, my chest aching. How did I not see it sooner? How did I not see her? The following morning, I sat with her over breakfast. "Why me, Elena?" I asked suddenly. She paused, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "Why agree to marry someone like me? Someone who made it clear she didn't want this." She lowered her gaze. "Because I knew you wouldn't choose me, and that made it safe." She bit her lip as if weighing the risk of her own honesty. "I didn't want to fall for someone who would love me back." She smiled sadly. "I thought I could control it with you. That if I stayed distant, I wouldn't get hurt." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she kept speaking. I was wrong. I stared at her, the weight of her confession crashing into me. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words got stuck. She stood up quickly. "I need to go. I have errands." I watched her leave, my hands balled in fists. Why was this suddenly so hard to breathe? Why did it feel like something was slipping through my fingers? That evening, I sat alone on the balcony, watching the stars she loved so much. For the first time, I wondered if I was the one who was afraid to choose her. Afraid to admit that I already had. I kept watching Elena from a distance. Not because I didn't want to get closer, ep5 almost maybe, but because I didn't know how to. How do you approach someone you've unknowingly pushed away for so long? How do you ask them to stay when you've spent months pretending you didn't care? The next few days were quieter between us. Not the comfortable silence we used to share. This was heavier, louder. She kept going through the motions, cooking meals, folding my laundry, fixing whatever broke, but she didn't linger anymore. She stopped asking about my day. No more little notes on my desk. It felt like she was pulling back. And I hated that I noticed. I hated that it hurt. One night, after a brutal board meeting, I came home to a silent living room and a cold kitchen. Elena had left a plate on the table for me, still warm, carefully covered, but she wasn't there. Her bedroom door was ajar, lights off. I called. No answer. I couldn't explain why my chest tightened, why panic clawed at me. I grabbed my keys and drove aimlessly through the city, trying to guess where she might be. Terrified she wouldn't come back. I found her at a small park by the river, alone on a bench, a sketchbook open on her lap. She was drawing the night sky, pencil moving in the faintest strokes. I parked and strode toward her, pulse racing. Elena, I called, breathless. She looked up, startled. Avery, why are you here? You didn't answer your phone. I just wanted to be alone for a while. That's not safe. I snapped. It's late, she said, one brow lifting. Since when do you care where I go? It stung. I'd earned that. I care now, I said quietly, stepping closer. Please don't disappear on me like that again. She searched my face as if hunting for a lie. Why? She asked, voice unsteady. Why do you care now? I swallowed the knot in my throat. Because the house isn't a home when you're not in it. Her lips parted, eyes shining. I sank to a knee in front of her, my voice barely steady. Because now I notice when the flowers wilt, when the music stops, when the notes are gone, when you're gone. I took her cold hands in mine. Because I think I'm starting to fall for you, and I don't know how to stop. Silence. A single tear slid down her cheek. Don't say that, she whispered. Not if you're going to walk away again. I won't. You don't believe in love. Maybe I didn't. I admitted. But maybe I do now. Maybe I just didn't know it was you I'd been waiting for. Her breath hitched. Elena, don't leave me. I didn't know I could sound that desperate, that honest. She cupped my face, wiping away a tear I hadn't felt fall. I was never going to leave, she murmured. I just needed to know if you would notice. I let out a shaky breath and leaned into her touch. I notice. I will. Always. We didn't rush that night. We walked the river path side by side. We laughed for the first time, real laughter, the kind that felt like ours. We went home together. We sat in the living room until midnight, trading stories we'd never given to anyone else. And when we said goodnight, it was softer. It was hopeful. The wedding date crept closer. For the first time, I didn't dread it. I finally understood why people look forward to it. Maybe I wanted to look forward to it, too. But life rarely waits for us to catch up. Just when I thought I'd found something worth holding, something worth choosing, fate reminded me how easily it can be taken. Everything began to fall into place. For ep6, choosing her the first time, I looked forward to going home, knowing Elena would be there. The house was brighter, lighter, ours. We fell into a quiet rhythm. Shared breakfasts, lingering conversations, walks on the balcony at night. I started learning the things that made her laugh. The kind of books she liked. The way she hated tomatoes. But always picked them out with a shy apology if I cooked. She still drew me. But now I let her. Now I loved when she did. My parents noticed the change. You seem happier, my mother teased one evening during dinner. I only smiled, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of hearing me admit it out loud. But I was. I was happy and terrified because for the first time, I had something to lose. As the wedding approached, I caught myself picturing a future, not one forced by obligation, but one I wanted. A future with Elena's quiet laugh filling the kitchen. A future with her sketches piled on our coffee table. A future with her chosen, not arranged. One night, I found her sketching on the balcony again. This time, she was drawing both of us. "Do you still think this is all for money?" she asked softly, not looking at me. I sat beside her, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "No," I said, meaning it. Her pencil stilled, her shoulders relaxed. I held her hand, running my thumb along her knuckles. "I'm choosing you, Elena. Not because of the company, not because of my parents, just you." She looked at me, then really looked like she was searching for any trace of doubt. And when she found none, she smiled. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The following days were filled with final fittings, guest lists, endless preparations. We went together, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. We laughed at silly wedding decorations, chose flowers I didn't even know the names of, and debated over cake flavors like we were just two people planning our day. Not a transaction, not a contract. Our wedding. The night before the wedding, Elena's parents invited both our families for dinner at their home. A quiet gathering before the big day. Elena was radiant that night, her eyes glowing with the kind of peace I'd never seen in her before. We sat close. We held hands under the table, and when no one was looking, I leaned in and whispered, "I can't wait to marry you." She blushed, biting her lip to hide her smile. "I can't wait either." When we said our goodbyes, Elena's mother hugged me tightly. "Take care of our daughter," she whispered. I promised I would. I promised I'd choose her every day. The next morning, I waited at the venue. Guests filled the seats. Soft music played in the background. Everything was ready, and except them. Elena and her family. I checked my phone. No messages, no calls. Minutes passed, then an hour. Then my father pulled me aside, his face pale, his lips trembling. "There was an accident." My heart dropped. "They were on their way here," he said, his voice breaking. "There was a truck. They didn't survive." I couldn't breathe. The world blurred. "Elena," I rasped, gripping his arm like a lifeline. She survived. She's in the ICU. But she's in a coma, Avery. She hasn't woken up." Everything shattered. The music, the flowers, the guests. None of it mattered anymore. I rushed to the hospital, desperate to see her. When I did, she looked so small, so fragile. Machines beeped steadily, keeping her alive. I sat beside her, clutching her cold hand. "I was going to choose you," I whispered, tears falling. I was ready. I never left the hospital. I paid for the best doctors. I arranged the funeral for her parents. I made sure she had private nurses, the best care. But I couldn't bring myself to visit her room again because every time I saw her, the guilt suffocated me. What if I had gone with them? What if I had asked them to leave earlier, later? What if I'd said something the night before to make her stay with me? What if I waited and waited, but she didn't wake up? I thought I'd have more time to love her. I thought I'd have more time to tell her. But time was cruel and I was too late. Ep 7. When the world stops, I stayed by Elena's side for weeks. The doctor said she was stable, but unresponsive. Her body was healing, but her mind was somewhere else. Sometimes I would sit beside her, holding her hand, whispering things I never had the courage to say when she was awake. I told her I missed her, that I was ready to love her, that I chose her now. But she never answered. People came and went, family, friends, distant relatives, business associates, offering their sympathies. But I stayed. I waited. I clung to the fragile hope that Elena would open her eyes and come back to me. I remember the morning of the accident in painful detail. Elena was supposed to ride with me to the venue, but her father insisted she go with them. "It's a family moment," he said. The last ride together before she marries you. I agreed, smiling as Elena kissed me on the cheek and whispered, I'll see you at the altar. I was waiting when the call came. A truck had lost control on the highway. The collision was brutal. The car flipped. Her parents died instantly. Elena survived, but barely. The weight of it crushed me. I could still hear her laughter from last night, still see her smiling face, still feel the warmth of her hand in mine. And now all that remained was the steady beep of hospital machines. I handled everything. The funeral, the hospital bills, the legal paperwork. I made sure Elena had everything she needed, but I never visited her room again because every time I stood by her side, I saw the life we almost had, and it tore me apart. Months passed. I told myself I was waiting for her to wake up, but deep down, I knew I was hiding from the guilt, from the pain, from the truth, because I was the one who pushed her away for so long. And just when I was finally ready to choose her, she was taken from me. One day, I walked into her room and found it empty. The bed was neatly made. The machines were gone. My heart stopped. A nurse approached me gently. She's gone. Gone? I choked. She died? No, the nurse said quickly. She woke up 2 days ago. She checked herself out this morning. She's gone as in she left. I staggered backward, my knees threatening to give out. She didn't leave any message. The nurse hesitated. She left this. She handed me a small folded note. Inside, in Elena's delicate handwriting, it said, I survived, Avery, but I can't stay in a place where I was never truly wanted. Thank you for everything. I'll be fine. Please be happy, even without me. She left without a word, without a goodbye, without letting me explain. The house became quiet again. The flowers wilted. The music stopped. Her sketches gathered dust. The life I was finally ready to fight for disappeared. And I realized painfully that this time I was the one left behind. Ep8 chasing shadows. Days passed, then weeks, then months, but I couldn't find Elena. I called every hospital for every mutual friend. I visited her family's old house, her favorite cafes, the park by the river where she used to draw. Nothing. It was as if she had erased herself from my world completely. And maybe she did. Maybe she was right too. I threw myself into work. I built the company higher, faster, harder, as if success could fill the echoes she left behind. But the house remained silent. My victories felt hollow. And no matter how hard I worked, I always came home to the same quiet space. Her absence followed me like a shadow. One found her old sketchbook one night buried under some unopened boxes. Pages and pages filled with drawings of me sipping coffee, me reading, me sleeping on the couch, me smiling at her. There were drawings I never knew she made. Moments when I thought she wasn't looking, but she was. I traced the edges of the pencil lines with my fingertips, my throat tightening. I didn't realize she was always watching me the way I eventually started watching her. I kept reading her note. Please be happy even without me. But I wasn't. I wasn't happy. And I didn't want to be happy without her. I wanted to be happy with her. I remember what my mother once told me after the accident. You were always so afraid to love because you thought it would make you weak. But it made you human, Avery, and that's what you needed to be. I didn't understand it then, but I do now because when you finally let yourself love someone, it's not weakness, it's bravery. And I was ready to be brave. I called the wedding coordinator. I asked for the guest list. I called Elena's distant cousins. I tracked down her old classmates. Piece by piece, I tried to find a trail until finally someone mentioned seeing her. A small seaside town, far from the city, a quiet place where she could start over. I didn't hesitate. I packed my bags and drove all night. I arrived at dawn. The town was peaceful, the air crisp with salt. There was a small local art shop by the pier, and there behind the counter ranging sketchbooks was Elena. She looked peaceful, but thinner, lonelier. She hadn't noticed me yet. I took a step closer. my heart racing, my pulse thundering in my ears. And then she looked up, and our eyes met. Her breath hitched, her hands froze. For a long moment, neither of us moved. And then quietly, she said the only thing she could. "Avery." I smiled, small, hopeful, aching. "Hey," I breathed. "I finally found you." Lena didn't move. Her fingers tightened EP9, the words I want to say around the edges of the sketchbook. She was holding, as if afraid I'd vanish if she blinked. I took a careful step closer. "You left," I whispered, my throat dry. "You didn't even let me explain." Her lips trembled. "You didn't have to. I knew." "Knew what?" "That you didn't love me enough to stay. That I was only there because of our parents. Because of a condition. Because you pied me." I shook my head, stepping even closer. "That's not true. Not anymore." She swallowed hard, lowering her gaze. "I waited, Avery. I waited for you to come see me when I woke up, but you never did. So I thought maybe I was right to leave." I flinched. I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that I was too late. That I didn't deserve you. Scared that even if you woke up, you wouldn't want to see me anymore. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "So, you just disappeared." I closed the distance between us, my voice cracking as I spoke. "I was wrong, Elena. I should have come. I should have fought for you right then. But I was selfish. I let my guilt paralyze me. I thought maybe you'd be happier if you started over without me." Her voice broke. I wasn't happier. I reached for her hand, hesitating, afraid she would pull away. But she didn't. Neither was I. Silence fell between us, thick with everything we never said. Then finally, I whispered, "I choose you, Elena. Not because of the company. Not because of our parents. I choose you because I love you." Her breath hitched, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "You never said that before." "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life saying it now if you'll let me." She stared at me for a long moment. Then quietly she asked, "Do you still have the ring?" I blinked. "What are wedding rings? Do you still have them?" I smiled softly, reaching into my pocket. "I brought them." Her tears fell freely now, but a small laugh escaped her lips. "I can't believe you kept them." I never stopped believing I'd get to give it to you properly. I slipped the simple band onto her finger. She traced it slowly as if grounding herself to the moment. "Avery," I cubed her face gently. "I was always so afraid of love because I thought it would control me. But you made me realize it can set me free." She leaned into my touch, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust you not to leave again." "Then I'll stay. I'll stay until you believe me." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You're really here." "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She closed her eyes, tears spilling over, and finally let herself fall into my arms. I held her tightly as if anchoring us both back to the life we were meant to have. The life we almost lost. We spent the day together, walking by the shore, rediscovering each other piece by piece. It wasn't perfect. There were still wounds to heal, still walls to break. But we were finally walking the same path together. When the sun set, she looked at me with that same shy, beautiful smile I'd fallen in love with. "So, do you still want to marry me?" she teased softly. I grinned. "I'd marry you 1,000 times if you let me." We didn't rush this time. There were no deadlines, no EP10 choosing her everyday contracts, no anxious parents pressuring us. Just us. Just love. Finally love. We stayed in the seaside town for weeks, living simply. I would work remotely in the mornings, and in the afternoons, we'd visit the local markets, share street food, and watch the sun melt into the ocean. I never thought I could be happy like this. Not with all the money, not with all the power. But here with Elena, I was home. I asked her one evening as we sat by the shore watching the soft waves kiss the sand, "Why did you leave without waiting for me to explain?" She was quiet for a while before answering. I didn't want to hear you say you were relieved, or worse, that you were only staying out of guilt. I tightened my hold on her hand. I would have never said that. I know that now. She turned to me, eyes soft but still cautious. But I had to learn to choose myself first before I could let anyone else choose me. I smiled, my heart full. I'm glad you did, because now you're not just here because of our parents. You're here because you chose to be. And you, she whispered, I'm here because I've never been more sure of anything in my life. When we finally decided to return to the city, we held a small wedding. No grandeur, no endless guest list, no corporate expectations, just us, our closest friends, a quiet garden under soft fairy lights. I watched Elena walk down the aisle, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And when we exchanged vows, I promised her what I should have promised from the very beginning. I'll choose you every day, in every lifetime, in every version of our story. Whether it's easy, whether it's hard, whether you're near or far, I will choose you. She smiled through her tears and whispered, I will choose you, too. I slipped the ring onto her finger. This time, not as a condition, not as an obligation, but as a promise. A promise that love, when chosen freely, is the most beautiful vow we can ever make. Our life after the wedding wasn't perfect. There were still days when we argued, when the scars of the past resurfaced, when we had to remind each other that love isn't something you win once. It's something you choose again and again. But we were happy. We built a home filled with laughter, with art, with quiet mornings and long conversations. A home we chose together. Sometimes when she sketches, I still catch her stealing glances at me, and epilogue the space between us every time I smile, knowing I'm no longer afraid to let her see me completely, because she's not just part of my life now. She is my life. And this time, I will never let her go. The soft waves kissed the shore, the night breeze carrying the faint scent of salt and jasmine. As we stepped into our beachfront villa, Elena walked in first, barefoot on the polished wood floor, her white sundress swaying just above her knees. The sunset painted her in golds and pinks, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. This was real. She's mine now. Ours. Finally, completely ours. I placed our bags down, but I didn't care about anything else. Not the view, not the lavish room, just her. Elena turned to me, her lips curling into that shy smile I've memorized. Are you just going to stare at me all night? She teased softly. I walked towards her slowly, savoring each step like I might wake from this if I moved too quickly. I could watch you forever. Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. You already have. I reached her, cupping her face gently, my thumbs brushing her cheeks. The moment stretched between us, full of warmth, of knowing of the love we both spent years denying. I kissed her softly, as if relearning the taste of her, and she melted into me like she'd been waiting for this. For us. Her hand slid up my arms, settling around my neck. As she pressed herself closer, her body warm, familiar, and finally mine to hold without hesitation. Avery, she whispered against my lips, her voice trembling. You don't have to be careful with me anymore. I pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. I want to be. I want to take my time with you. I want to memorize you. She exhaled shakily, her cheeks flushed. Then take your time. I led her to the edge of the bed, my hands tracing the curve of her waist, the slope of her back. Every touch, every kiss, slow, intentional, because I didn't want to rush through this. I wanted to feel her, to let her feel me. As I slipped her dress over her shoulders, she shivered, not from the breeze, but from the weight of the moment. I kissed the skin. I uncovered her collarbone, her shoulder, the place where her pulse fluttered wildly. Her hands trembled slightly as she undid the buttons of my shirt. And when I asked, nervous, she laughed softly. Not nervous, just I've wanted this for so long. So have I. We explored each other slowly, as if rediscovering familiar territory now without walls, without fear. When our skin met, I realized this wasn't just about desire. This was about trust. It's about surrender and about finally letting go of all the things we used to hold ourselves back. Elena gasped when I traced gentle lines along her spine. I whispered to her that she was beautiful, that she was everything I never dared to want, and she whispered that I was home. The night was a symphony of soft sigh, tender kisses, tangled limbs, and the sacred way we called each other's names like prayers. There was no rush, no need to prove anything, only the quiet devotion of two souls choosing each other fully, completely, endlessly. When we collapsed into each other, exhausted but glowing, she curled into my chest, her fingers playing with mine. She looked up at me, her smile soft, her eyes filled with something I couldn't name, but I felt it deep in my bones. Avery Knox, thank you for coming back for me. I kissed her forehead. I will always find my way back to you. Her voice was a whisper now, like a secret meant only for me. And I'll always be waiting for you. We fell asleep wrapped in each other, the sound of the waves steady and constant, like our hearts, like our promise. This was the life I almost lost. This was the love I never believed I deserved, said. And now I would never let it go. The space between us doesn't exist anymore. It's filled with love, with trust, with the promise that this time we're not running. Not from each other, not from love. Because I finally learned love isn't something that cages you. It's something that holds you, that wraps around you, that lets you breathe. And I will breathe her, hold her, love her for the rest of my life. I used to believe endings were signatures, one precise flourish across a contract. That closed the matter for good. If you told me then that endings could behave like doors creaking, opening, leading into rooms I didn't even know I wanted, I would have called you naive. Then I married the woman I once promised myself I would never love. And the door did what doors do when you finally stop bracing against them. It opened. The morning after the beach, the sea had a pulse like a sleeping animal. The tide breathed in, breathed out, and the villa's windows caught the light in slow sheets. Ellen awoke first. I know because her sketches woke me, paper sliding, pencil whispering. When I turned on the pillow, she was sitting cross-legged with her hair tied in a knot that would eventually escape itself, drawing the ocean as if it were a face she recognized from somewhere tender. You're staring, she said without looking up. I'm learning, I answered. To do what? To start a day without armor. She set the pencil down, considered that, and opened the space beside her with a pat to the mattress. We didn't speak for a while. Not everything needs language. Sometimes a gentle collision of foreheads says enough. The sun climbed, the gulls negotiated their scraps, the kettle clicked. I made the coffee the way she taught me in the seaside town, slow, attentive, like a prayer you mean. We drank it on the steps with our toes on warm wood and our rings bright, and absurdly brave in the light. Do you ever wonder, I asked, whether love is only real if we choose it again tomorrow? She smiled into her cup. I think that's what makes it love and not luck. Then let's be unromantic about it, I said, because my native tongue is precision. Let's build it like a habit. You take the art of us. I'll take the spreadsheets. We meet in the kitchen at 7 for the rest of our lives. 7? That's early. Fine. 7:30. She laughed, and there it was, the sound I could live inside. Deal, she said, and stuck her pinky out to make it a contract. The least serious contracts are the ones that transform you. I hooked her finger with mine and felt something old and armored step back to make room. We stayed 3 days. We learned the tide's moods and each other's. At night we breathed in rhythm and didn't pretend not to hear when grief curled at the door. The way a cat does, insistent, familiar, not malicious so much as inevitable. We let it in. We fed it small kindnesses, names said out loud, memories not avoided, and it slept at our feet without claws. On the drive back to the city, I kept one hand on the wheel and the other where it belonged, palm up on the console. Her fingers combed through mine, punctuation marks of trust. The skyline grew, the road shouldered us along, and there it was, my house. which used to echo with my own footsteps like a hotel lobby. It didn't echo when we opened the door. People like to imagine transformation as a single afternoon, a thunderclap, a vow, a new self stepping over the threshold. That's a cute headline. The truth is quieter and more repetitive. First, we made lists. Of course we did. I am me. On the back of a pizza menu, under the word home, we wrote to columns. Keep. The long table for friends. The sparrow gray couch for naps. The lemon tree on the balcony for summer. Change. The echo curtains. The cold corners lamps. The emptiness us. Then we made a third column that Elena insisted on. Listen. The rooms. What do they say? I asked, indulgent, skeptical. She knocked on a wall with the back of her knuckles. It answered hollow. This one says, let me hold you without reminding you of boardrooms. And this one, she swiped a finger through dust on the bookshelf, says, touch me. I'm trying to remember your story. I have negotiated with chairmen who think every concession is a small death. I have out-argued lawyers who could convince mirrors to doubt themselves. I surrendered without a fight to a woman asking the house to speak. Within a week, the place learned our names. Jazz on Sundays. Soft, like a rumor. Towels that didn't smell like industrial nothingness but like lavender and sunlight. A bowl by the door that held keys and shells and a brass ring from a fisherman's net we bought. From a boy at the pier. A blanket on the couch that, when draped over to people at once, turned movies into survival popcorn, salt on fingertips. A pause button used freely to say, remember when you told me that story about the town with the pink bus? And I didn't know you snort when you laughed that hard, and please don't lose that face. That exact one. On the bedroom door we stuck a small paper sign. Off-duty Empire Building. The first night we forgot to silence my phone. It lit up the ceiling like lightning. I almost reached for it. She didn't say a word, just lifted our joined hands and moved them away from the nightstand gentle. Absolute. The notification blinked itself exhausted and died unrequited. We made new rituals. A white bowl in the kitchen labeled what we noticed today. We dropped notes into it after dinner. A woman feeding a street cat from her takeout box. A construction worker who waved at a school bus. The smell of rain on hot pavement petrichor. Lena. The word is petrichor, and the way her face lit up like a classroom when I said it. A shoe rack with room for his and hers and a third pair labeled guest even when no one was coming. As if to remind ourselves that open space is not waste. It is welcome. A small framed sketch by the elevator. Me. Drawn by her hand in 3 long strokes. Eyes softened. Beneath it she wrote, in tiny letters only I would lean close enough to read. Avery chooses. Every morning, while the elevator blinked downstairs 1 floor at a time, I read those words and felt my spine choose the posture to match them. The staff adjusted to us like one good organism. In the past they learned my silences and rose early to meet them. Now they learned my wife's laughter and let the day be a little later. When they put fresh lilies on the hallway console, they left a note that said, for Elena's mother. We left a second note that said, for yours. It became a quiet game, a vocabulary of kindness without any need to declare it out loud. I found a therapist who listened more than she labeled and didn't turn the worst day of my life into a ladder I was supposed to climb on command. Elena found a grief group that met in a church basement where someone always brought brownies and no one pretended better was the same as different. On Tuesdays we compared notes the way kids report to each other after school. What did your group say? That sometimes love is letting the memory move to a different room, so the kitchen can have the table back. That routine is a mercy, not a denial. Also, my therapist says you're good for me in ways we can measure, and in ways we can't. I like her already. She swears a little. She's perfect. We spoke Amelia and her parents' names out loud on purpose. There's dignity in refusal to euphemize and put their pictures in places where dust couldn't pretend not to see them. Some nights grief insisted on a toast. We raised ginger ale, because some things deserve bubbles without consequences. On the first anniversary of the accident that nearly unmade us, we ditched work without apology and drove aimlessly with a cooler packed with sliced fruit and sandwiches wrapped like gifts. We pulled into a town we'd never heard of, left 3 bouquets on porches of houses with peeling paint and hand-lettered welcome signs, then bolted like teenagers before anyone could ask why. In the car, I caught myself grinning with my teeth in the open air, ridiculous and real. "Do you realize," Elena said, sunlight on her knuckles, "you just committed random acts of floristry?" "Felony tier," I said. "Hope there aren't cameras." "There are." We waved. We kept driving. Work had been a fortress I patrolled, my name honed into a spear. The lobby smelled like money. The elevators could read rank from the tilt of a shoulder. The glass on the 43rd floor was so spotless it refused to remember fingerprints. We changed that the way you fix a recipe. Keep the bones. Add salt where someone forgot that flavor isn't the enemy of nourishment. In our second week back, I invited my parents to dinner and chose a place with lights low enough for old love to survive. My mother arrived draped in silk, her hair a question mark as always. My father showed up with his watch set 10 minutes fast because he fears time, the way other men fear a microphone. "We expected you at the office," he said after the waiter left us with a wine list and a gentleman's smirk. "I was setting up an endowment," I said. "For what?" "Art classes at the rehabilitation hospital, and a driver training scholarship in her parents' names." Silence has a tone when to people who like to win both realize winning needs a new definition. My mother broke first. "I was wrong to call love a distraction," she said, watching the candle as if it might take dictation. "I used the word because I didn't understand the cost of the alternative." My father cleared his throat. "What will you need from the board?" "Less of them," I answered softly, and then I added the muscles timelines, KPIs, numbers they could hold in their hands. Under the table, Elena squeezed my knee. Later she admitted she considered that squeeze a tactical maneuver equal to any of my slide decks. I issued her a plaque paper, printed on the spot to Elena, for strategic support under candlelight, which she hung in the pantry, as if awards belong near snacks. In the months that followed, we rewrote policies without fanfare. After 8 p.m., the servers were instructed to bounce most incoming corporate email into a folder literally called "Tomorrow." HR renamed bereavement family leave all kinds and added a line that said, "Tell us who you lost. We will not require proof of your love." The compliance team created a calendar of red days, hospital visits, custody hearings, court dates, anniversaries people could tag privately so managers would stop asking for the same report. On the worst possible afternoon, none of it dented the balance sheet. All of it changed the way the building exhaled. When investors asked for my 5-year plan, I told them a number. When they asked why the number was the number and not a bigger one, I told them a story. In the old days, I would have laughed at me. In the new days, I watched their faces soften in the precise second it took for the line to move from graph to throat. They stopped calling me ruthless. They started calling me effective. I didn't need either word anymore. We went back to the seaside town in late spring, not because we had to, but because the body recognizes coordinates where it was unafraid. At the pier shop where I first saw her again, the owner, a woman with forearms like good bread, recognized Elena immediately and me eventually. She reached below the counter, rummaged, and came up with a sketchbook Elena had left behind in the months when leaving felt safer than finding. "I kept it," the woman said, "in case courage has a forwarding address." Elena took the book like she was receiving an organ for transplant. On the first page, in pencil, she had copied a quote, "I will love with both hands." Under it, she'd drawn 3 chairs, one empty, one occupied by a woman with a bun me, formidable even in graphite, and one by a woman with her head tilted to listen her, all sitting on a porch that looked vaguely like the hinge of a door. On the last page she had mapped the town with 5 dots, the bench we sat on, The bakery with the cinnamon rolls that made language briefly irrelevant. The stretch of sand where we promised to learn how to be ordinary. We spent a week there doing small important things. We learned the names of gulls from an old man who had too many stories and no one to hand them to. We started a ritual of leaving a folded paper boat in the tide at dusk. The boat carried nothing but a word on its deck. Stay, heel, laugh, call. We watched them spin and sink. We did not go after them. We trusted the ocean to deliver what could be delivered back to shore in stranger forms. On the last night, we traced our initials in wet sand, circled them, watched the water do what water does. When the circle blurred, we drew it again a foot higher, then stepped back and let erasure teach us that permanence is not the point. What is the point then? I asked as the sky performed its tired miracle of going pink, then gold, then that color nobody agrees on, that we keep drawing, she said, rubbing sand off her hands. Not because the circle stays, because we do. The first big fight didn't arrive like a storm. It arrived like a draft through a window we forgot to latch. I had a board meeting where the numbers refused to behave. An old rival wore a grin that looked like litigation, and a younger executive in his hurry to show he knew more than he did misquoted a figure, and then the misquote walked itself into the minutes. I used to be excellent at turning this kind of chaos into proof of my superiority. That day, the old reflexes rose like a scuba diver to fast for their blood. I snapped. By noon the room was silent in that particular way rooms get silent when the most powerful person has just reminded everyone they could be dangerous on command. I walked out and into the small conference room where the carpet still keeps a faint ghost of coffee from a life that is not ours but taught me how to live mine. I texted Elena to meet me if she could. She came without a coat, hair damp from the rain, cheeks pink from choosing my call over the umbrella stand. What happened? She asked, not accusing. I made the weather worse, I said, which is the most honest sentence I owned at that moment. She closed the door and did not rush to solve me. 3 breaths, she said. It is a thing we do now. If you have never stood above a city and counted your breathing out loud with a person who believes you are worth the oxygen, I recommend it with the urgency of an antidote. On the 4th breath I told her I was ashamed, which is a heavier admission than wrong. Wrong is a calculation you can redo. Shame is a costume that sticks. She stood on my toes, another ritual, slid her hands into my back pockets, a third, and said, a mistake is a version of you that is asking to be edited, not erased. I was cruel, I said. Were you precise? She asked. Yes. Then you know exactly where to apologize. I did. I went back to the rival first. Not because he deserved it more, but because my apology would travel farthest from that corner. I found the young exec who misquoted and told him precision is a kindness. He nodded like a boy who just discovered maps exist. I told the room we would set a standard no one would need to recover from later. Someone laughed in relief. It was me. After, in the elevator, Elena pressed her forehead to my shoulder and whispered, "You are terrifying when you're kind." It's my favorite thing. I can do terrifying, then do that one more. We ate noodles at our kitchen island and set our phones to do not ask mode, which is what we renamed do not disturb because words matter when you are trying to live inside them. Grief doesn't send calendar invites, but it keeps a calendar. On the 2nd spring after the accident, without warning, the air in the house shifted color at noon. Elena put the kettle on, and then took it off, and then put it on again, her hands unsure, her eyes not tracking the tasks they assigned themselves. What day is it? I asked, as if she had the only accurate clock. March 12th, she said, and stared at the magnets on the fridge as if they could flip to any page she asked. Their anniversary. She meant her parents. I had taken that date into my phone quietly the previous year, and notorious for my memory. Still managed to let it slide until the air told me. She saw the realization land on my face, and for a second the room considered whether it should become a courtroom. Say what you're about to say, she said. Say I forgot. Don't say I almost remembered. I forgot, I said, because love is not a performance of omniscience. I am sorry I forgot. Tell me what to do now. I want lilies and the blue thermos from the top shelf, she said, tears spilling without panic. I want to take them to the cemetery and complain about weeds and the price of milk. I want to tell my mother I married someone who buys too many lemons. I do not buy too many lemons. You do. It's adorable. Come on. We drove. We left lilies and water that tasted like metal at first sip and then like childhood. We pulled weeds with our bare hands and flung them into a pile that became triumph. We told small lies, yes. We sleep 8 hours and bigger truths. Sometimes I think I can smell Dad's soap on strangers. On the train, and I follow them. We sat on the grass until the light thinned into a kind of mercy. And then we drove home holding hands, forgetting and remembering and forgiving as if they were siblings sharing a backseat. That night, I woke to find her standing on the balcony, bare feet, sweatshirt. The air cool enough to turn you honest. I joined her, blanket over both of us, and we watched the city insist on its own relentless aliveness. Do you ever hate how love makes you fragile? I asked. Every day, she said. And then, I like the person it makes me more. Who is that? Someone who buys lilies on purpose. We went back to bed and slept hard. Summer arrived like relief. We adopted a dog we didn't need from a rescue that did. The shelter had called him Bean because he was small and jittery and designed for sunlight. We kept the name because resisting perfection is rude. Bean taught us to get home before dusk, to say outside like it is a winning lottery, to leave shoes in the closet, because he could turn laces into modern art faster than any intern. He slept between us the first week because we are weak and love is not a staircase. You climb with discipline. It's a pile of blankets you dive into with sunscreen half-rubbed. Elena started teaching a Saturday morning sketch class at the community center. Her first students were 3 grandmothers who could draw hands better than God and a 9-year-old, who insisted on adding a dragon to every still life. The dragon acquired a reputation for biting anyone who said realism like a threat. I sat in the back sometimes with Bean under my chair and watched her arrange a room. The way a conductor ranges sound quiet where quiet comes, loud where loud liberates. On Tuesdays she ran a grief fan art group, which might sound like a risk until you see what happens when sadness is allowed to choose a color. People made trees where the leaves were the names of people who died. And then a woman suggested she could add the names of the people who hold her now. The tree filled both pages, and when she was done she cried in the relieved way of a kettle that finally screamed, and then was lifted off the flame. Our weekends became a mosaic of overripe peaches, paint-marked elbows, subsidies disguised as tips, and nap-heavy afternoons where my most challenging task was deciding whether to read a novel or fall asleep on the sentence where the detective explains the clue incorrectly on purpose. Evenings, we walked the long block that turned into 3 and eventually 5, because the body understands distance as proof that time is being spent with intent. We talked about children in those meandering ways people do when they are not yet answering a question as much as writing the preamble to one. What if we foster? She said, watching a teenager fling himself into a basketball hoop's metal embrace and miss. What if we mentor? I said, watching the same teenager retrieve the ball with ritual humiliation and relief simultaneously. What if we don't decide this like an acquisition? She said pointedly toward my pocket where my phone slept like a consumed animal. What if we decide it like a picnic? Do we have enough joy to share? Do we want more ants? Eventually, the question ripened into an answer. We signed up with a program that paired professionals with high school seniors writing application essays, with nothing in their pockets but grit and the grades to prove it. Tuesday evenings turned into advising hours at our kitchen table. Metaphors, transcripts, tears that meant something was being admitted for the first time more than they meant sadness. Bean became a therapy dog, which is to say he learned to receive a lot of scratching while someone said, "My father thinks art is a waste." And Elena said, "My father wanted me to be happy." and then died before I could tell him I am. And the room did not break. It got big enough for the sentence. I was not softened so much as sharpened into a better shape. Power didn't scare me anymore. It obeyed me because I finally asked it the right questions. Whom does this serve? Who leaves the room safer? Which number hides a person? The night one of our advisees read her acceptance letter out loud in our living room, Elena squeezed my hand hard enough to rearrange the bones. The girl's mother cried like she had been holding her breath since 2005. I poured lemonade with mint and didn't pretend it was a celebration of our goodness. It was a celebration of mathematics done correctly. We had more. We gave some away. We didn't die. On our second wedding anniversary, the small one, under fairy lights, I woke Elena by humming a tune I know she cannot resist. She opened one eye. Is that the waffle song? An original composition. I lied and held up the cheap waffle iron I bought at a pharmacy on a dare. The first waffle glued itself to the machine like a codependent relationship. The second came out shaped like Nevada. The third achieved a level of competence that made us cocky. We ate standing at the counter with jam on our wrists and a schedule we had no interest in obeying. When the syrup bottle refused to produce, she popped the top and smacked its belly like a ketchup bottle in a diner. Is this domesticity? I asked, suspicious. This is breakfast, she answered, and kissed jam at the corner of my mouth. We took our plates to the balcony and fed bean crumbs against the advice of the internet. Across the street, a woman in a robe waved at us with a spoon. Somewhere, a trumpet tried to learn a scale. The day constructed itself without us until we stepped into it and asked for a roll. What would you like to do? I asked. She pretended to consult a very serious calendar. I'm between a nap and you. False choice, I said. There's a third option. What is it? Both. We did not leave the house. The word anniversary used to itch. It doesn't anymore. We observe the hard ones like weather, take cover, hold hands, let it pass. We celebrate the soft ones like groceries, ordinary, necessary, good. Later that afternoon we visited the river. The bench where she waited the night I finally told the truth is still there. Someone carved initials into the metal arm. Teenagers think steel is paper. On the underside, where only a person who has dropped her keys would see, a sticker reads, if you are reading this, go home if you can. If you cannot, call someone who remembers your laugh. I didn't put the sticker there. Elena didn't either. The city has 1,000 anonymous poets. We are not the only ones rearranging air. We sat. We watched the water pretend to hurry. It is lying. Rivers know exactly where they are and do not rush when they are sure. Do you feel brave? She asked. I feel held, I said. That's what brave feels like in a language that doesn't aggrandize suffering. We kissed the way you kiss when you're not inventing anything new, just recommitting to the oldest invention there is. Every story wants a catastrophe to prove it is real. Ours did not give you that satisfaction again. What it gave us were 100 almost catastrophes we survived by announcing them, before they could pretend to be dragons. On a Tuesday in September, I forgot the word petrichor and reached for ozone, and then for that smell, and then got angry because a thing I pride myself on language had deserted me on a day that felt ordinary enough to deserve nothing but competence. I swore, too loud, at no one. Bean ducked his head. Elena put the kettle on and did not tell me to calm down or remind me who I used to be, or look at me like a problem to be solved before bedtime. She put 2 mugs on the table. I stared at my hands. I hate losing small words. I feel like my mind grew holes, I said. They're not holes, she said. They're windows. Things go out. Better things come in. The word will wander back when it's ready. It did. As words do when they've finished proving they're not owned. We drank the tea. We said the word together like kids on the first day of school. Petrichor. I slept better than people with empires are supposed to sleep. On a Friday in February, Elena woke and couldn't. Grief had put a coat on her she could not get off. We canceled nothing because nothing was wrong. We canceled everything because something was heavy. We brought breakfast to bed. Toast, peanut butter, the kind of apples that crunch like competence. We watched videos of otters holding hands sleeping. The stunned part of me that once weaponized productivity against tenderness sat down in the corner, so tenderness could finish its work. At dusk she said, "I want lilies." And we walked to the market and bought lilies that we carried home like trophies we had earned. On a Monday in May, our advisee called from campus and said she missed home so much she couldn't taste food. We spoke to her from the kitchen floor, our backs against the cabinets like teenagers in hiding, and listened until the craving for disappearing passed. When she hung up, we stared at each other the way people do when they realize they have been entrusted with something sacred and have not broken it. If what you want is spectacle, I cannot give it to you without lying. If what you want is proof, then here it is. We were ordinary with intention, and the intention made all the difference. We made a foundation because money wants a job. We named it the Handsful Fund because my mother once told me in an airport, "You will always have your hands full," and meant it as a warning. Now it is a goal. The fund's rules fit on one page. We prefer small proposals built on the belief that kindness isn't a one-off gesture but a system. We buy bus tickets for undocumented women who need to leave town safely. We cover gas station hot food for truckers in snowstorms because a warm meal, given without expectation, can keep a person from choosing badly at midnight. We fund a lane of driving lessons in memory of two people who never reached a party where they were expected. And under the laminated sheet at the DMV we tape a note that reads, "You are allowed to go slow on purpose." Elena designed the logo, to hands neither clasped nor pleading open, cupped, as if to say here and now and yours. The first time she presented it to the board, I watched grown men, some of whom could buy small countries, stare at the screen, with their mouths just open enough that I could glimpse the boys who once wanted to be held and were told to be useful instead. The vote was unanimous. The money moved like a river with no rocks. When the press asked for photos, we sent images of people, not us. A nurse named Les Herrera with new sneakers because 12-hour shifts are a long time to pretend your feet don't have nerves. A mechanic named Alex Vega whose shop added a front bench with a small roof, a box of children's books, and a sign that says, "Please sit if you need to be nobody's customer for 10 minutes. Our faces slipped into a few frames, my suit looser now. Her dress with pockets because she refuses to own anything that isn't useful. But I made sure the captions listed their names, not ours. The fund got busy because the world is a backlog of chances to act like neighbors. We kept it intentionally small, 1,000 paper boats instead of one yacht. We learned the names of a dozen grocery clerks, 3 librarians, and the woman who runs the shelter where Bean learned not to pee on shoes. When we travel, we buy coffee for whoever stands behind us in line and treat it like a tax we pay for the privilege of going anywhere. Are we good people? I asked once, wary of how the word good tends to preen. We're practicing, she said, better than any absolution. If you were waiting for a baby, I'm sorry to disappoint. We don't have one. Not yet. Possibly not ever. Our home is full. And that's not code for we're afraid. It's a celebration of capacity calibrated correctly. What we do have are godchildren, advisees, to teenagers who spend Friday afternoons at our table doing homework and pretending not to care about Bean, and an elderly neighbor whose nephew lives far away and who now has a key to our place, where he sometimes naps in a chair that understands his spine. Family is a verb in this house. Most days we conjugate it well. On others we guess the spelling and trust the meaning to carry us. We do have a star singular because that is how we decided to say it. On the anniversary of our first night at the villa, we went to the plant nursery and asked for a tree that would not give up in a city with opinions. The woman with dirt under her nails suggested a star magnolia. We liked the drama of the name, the understatement of the flowers. We put it in a big black pot on the balcony, a little ridiculous and entirely committed. In March, it explodes into white like a breaking wave. We take pictures we never post. We show them to each other on the couch as if the other person doesn't know what the tree looks like in person. Look, I say every time. A star. It's a magnolia, she says. Every time. Fine. Look. A magnolia. We laugh the way people laugh when they have a script they wrote together and can recite with their eyes closed. Our third wedding anniversary was the first time we returned to the Temple of What Ifs. The venue we never used. It's a garden behind a museum. All stone and vines and a fountain that doesn't know the difference between blessing and background noise. We walked in unannounced like to thieves with excellent alibis. No one stopped us. No one had to. The place recognized us. We stood under the arbor that once would have framed a ceremony born of obligation, and instead had framed nothing emptiness. A pause in the sentence where we eventually wrote a better clause. We didn't speak at first. Then Elena put two fingers against the wood and said, "Thank you for not holding the wrong day." I put my palm beside hers and said, "Thank you for waiting while we learned how to rive." If you have never thanked an object for not becoming your mistake, it is a strangely effective ritual. We left a bouquet on the bench. No card. The same anonymous generosity that once startled us into hope will do it to someone else now. I like the math of that. On the way out, a bride in an ivory dress walked in with two friends orbiting like moons and a mother whose face was a tornado of logistics and devotion. The bride saw us, then saw our rings, and then saw our hands and smiled the way a person smiles at a lighthouse, even if she doesn't need it that minute. "Congratulations," Elena said. "You too," the bride answered, as if time was willing to bend for the sake of politeness. When we got home, the magnolia had one late bloom left. I took it like a gift certificate and put it in a low glass bowl on the table. That night the room smelled like the color white. We slept with the balcony door cracked and the city came in like a cat, arrogant and purring. 4 years after the seaside reunion, I stood at the edge of our office roof where there's a railing we installed after I realized all roofs should refuse metaphors, and watched rain come in diagonally like a decision you make at last after months of not. On my left, the younger exec who had misquoted me stood with his tie undone, looking like he finally understood his mind was not a weapon he had to brandish to prove it was there. "You look different," he said, and then rushed. I mean that in a non-HR way. "I am different," I said, "because what is the point of a transformation if it's invisible to the building where you used to hide from yourself?" "How?" he asked, genuinely. "I have a wife," I said, and he nodded like that was a line item large enough to explain the number formatted in bold at the bottom of the spreadsheet of me. "Also," I added, "I have a dog." "Respect," he said. We went back inside and wrote an email to the entire company about rainy days and deadlines, and the right to choose your commute home over an inbox. We attached a photo of Bean wearing a yellow raincoat, and did not apologize for making the entire finance division say "ah" out loud in a workplace that once thought such sounds were illegal. When I got home, Elena was in the living room with 2 neighborhood kids who needed a place to do a science project, and she had clearly turned the dining table into a small NASA. There were marshmallows and toothpicks and a diagram labeled load-bearing in a 9-year-old's furious block print. I stood there with my shoes half off and thought, this is what wealth is. The ability to make a room available to sincerity at a moment's notice. "Avery chooses," Elena said, catching my eye. The old joke now a benediction. "Tonight I choose being a structural engineer," I said, rolling up sleeves. "Wrong," said the 9-year-old without looking up. "Your quality control?" "Perfect," I said, and meant it. We built a marshmallow bridge that looked illegal but wasn't. We took pictures. We printed one and stuck it on the fridge with a magnet that says grocery list on it, and then wrote nothing underneath. Which is to say, we had enough. We knew it. We absorbed the joy until it reached our bones. 5 years, and love is unrecognizable in the best ways. It is not a battlefield or a boardroom or a debutante ball for our better selves. It is a kitchen with good knives and the knowledge of where the band-aids live. It is a dog who forgives all tone of voice. It is a wife whose grief and radiance live in the same house, without calling the police on each other. It is the way my mother texts Elena photos of lilies now, as if to say I learned a flower by its true name. It is my father retiring the phrase time is money and replacing it with time is the thing we run out of, so spend it with taste. If you're looking for a single line to frame, here it is. We did not fix each other. We built a life where fixing is not the point. Our doorbell plays to notes that sound like a promise. Whenever we hear them, one of us says, "Home is about to get bigger," and the other says, "Let it." And Bean runs in circles because his job is joy, and he is excellent at it. Tonight, the city is the temperature of a held breath. The magnolia is asleep. The bowl on the counter holds 3 lemons fine too many and 1 lime a defector. Elena is on the floor with a pencil behind her ear, adding a dragon to a grocery list because the 9-year-old's habits are contagious. I am at the table with the fund's quarterly report and a pen I do not use to draw blood. The window throws back our reflection. 2 women, 1 dog. A living room that scolds the dark by refusing to be dim. "Come here," she says without looking up. "Why? Because I drew you wrong," she says. "I left off the soft parts. I have soft parts. A ridiculous number. I go. I sit." She turns my face toward the lamp and draws quickly, confidently, as if the line is a string she's known how to pull since before this version of time. When she finishes, she doesn't show me. She tears the page gently, folds it, tucks it into the white bowl where we keep the things we noticed. Tomorrow we'll read it with coffee and decide whether to frame it, to tape it behind the elevator buttons where only the patient will discover it, or to keep it where it is proof that noticing is its own end. We get into bed. The sheets cool our knees. Bean sighs the sigh of a creature who has completed his tasks for the day. Circles run. 14. Treats consumed. Not enough. Love received. Sufficient. The city reminds us it is alive with a siren and a couple arguing in the gentle way of people who know they will eventually laugh about it. Elena turns toward me. "Say it," she murmurs. The unromantic version. 7:30. Kitchen. For the rest of our lives. And the romantic one? "I choose you," I say. Not in italics, not in neon, but in the tone of a person signing a document she wrote with her own hands and intends to keep. She smiles a smile I haven't seen before and also somehow recognize completely. I turn off the lamp. The dark is not menacing. It is the room that holds sleep. I slide my hand under the pillow where a watch used to live and feels like the past. It isn't there. It is on the nightstand where it belongs. My pulse slows. I think of lilies on purpose, of paper boats with single words on their decks, of a bench by a river, of a seaside shop where courage was forwarded without address. I think of a girl who left without waiting for me to explain and a woman who stayed until I learned how to. Outside, a small wind rearranges the trees. Inside, we do nothing spectacular but everything required. We breathe. We do not run. We begin again. Morning comes. The kettle sings like a familiar friend. The house calls our names and we answer. We stand in the kitchen at 7:30, sometimes 8. Often late, and sketch the day on the back of a receipt in the only ink that matters. Her handwriting and mine, learning to share a line without crowding. And when the door opens again, as doors inevitably do, we step through carrying the only map that's ever worked for people like us. Keep, change, listen, choose. We take it into rooms, into rain, into the years that will hand us new vocabulary. We pin it by the door so a guest might see it and feel braver. We memorize it. We practice aloud. We correct each other when we forget. We forgive. We redraw the circle higher when the tide smooths it away. We laugh. Some days our love resembles a signed contract. Some days it's a dragon scribbled on a grocery list. Most days it's a magnolia in March, declaring itself without asking permission. And the distance between us, once a country with guards at the border, is now exactly the width of two cupped hands, making a bowl large enough to carry water, or light, or breakfast, which on a very good day are the same thing.